hello, thank you a lot for being here today with me and talking about your book. I'm going to say it in French.
Okay.
L'épopée d'un banquier, comment Edmond J. Safra a bâti un empire financier mondial. So it was really great because I was a little bit afraid at the beginning because I'm not a professional in financial global aspect of the world. And I was afraid not to have the keys to understand the life and the journey of Edmond J. Safra. And finally, I just found that this book is really great because we see the entire personality of Edmond Safra. It's not only the financial aspects, it's basically all the life, and we have the commercial aspects, financial aspects, but also the personal aspects of Edmond J. Safra. And it was just a man with a big heart and a lot of determination. It's quite a model of success, of determination, a businessman, a banker. So my first question would be, how did you meet with the personality of Edmond Safra? I just saw at the end of the book that your wife said you were born to, to write this book. Why this book? Why Edmond Safra?
Sure. So, by trade and profession, I'm a business writer. I've worked as a columnist at the New York Times, and I've covered the global financial crisis. I went to Davos every year. I've interviewed many executives. So that puts me in a position to write a book story about anybody's career in the 20th century of banking history. And Edmond Safra had a very interesting career in that way. He started 4 banks on 3 continents and was very successful and made a lot of money. And that's about half the story, because a banker is what he did for a living. Who he was a different story. He was a Jewish man from Beirut whose family had come from Syria. That's a very particular community and experience. And as luck would have it, that is also my heritage as well. My own great-grandparents came from Aleppo, which is where he was born. This is a community that even 100 years after leaving Syria and Lebanon sticks together, maintains its customs, its language, its way of life in many ways. And so to understand who he was as a person, you had to know that world as well. The Arabic slang that they used, the customs they followed. And my joke was that if you had make a Venn diagram of people who could write about 20th century financial narratives and people whose great-grandmother came from Aleppo, there's sort of one person in the middle of that, and that happened to be me. So in some ways I was well situated based on what I've done for a profession, but also who I was as a person, to have some insight into his life and his experience.
So you had the feeling that you were writing also the story of your community.
That's right. I say this is, of course, it's a biography. This is how it's structured. It is the story of a man. It is the story of his family, which has many generations. It is the story of a community, the Jews of Lebanon and Syria, who had to leave over the course of the 20th century. And it is the story also of a time, of a period of evolution of the global financial world, but also that part of the world and what happened in Lebanon and Syria in those years.
And the aspect I really liked in the book was the multicultural aspects of the book and of Edmond Safra. He lived in many places, like everywhere. We have banks in many places in the world, and we see the role of Alep in the book and in his life. Of course, that Alep was the basis of the multicultural aspects of Edmond Safra. Maybe Alep made him construct banks in many places of the world. What was the role of Alep in his life?
Aleppo, which of course today is largely in ruins, has a iconic history, not just for Jewish people, but for everybody who's from Syria. It's been a city for 2 or 3 millennia. There was a Jewish presence there in the time of the Bible. The synagogue there dates to the 3rd century. It was a spot on the Silk Road, the trade that went from China all the way to Europe. In the 1700s, European countries were sending consuls and diplomats to set up there. So there were people from Italy and England. It was this cosmopolitan place where a lot of business was done, where the language of commerce was very much understood, where it was common for people to be traveling and living and working elsewhere. And so if you were somewhere from Aleppo, it's not just the history and the cuisine, but this way of thinking, of, uh, the sophistication about business, of being willing to do business with other types of people from other religions and other geographies. That was part of that world, and that was part of his inheritance.
And if you had to choose one aspect of the life of Edmond Safra, maybe the one you take the most pleasure to write in the book, the financial aspects, the personal aspects, the aspect of the community also. What is the most important in his personality to define Edmond Safra?
Okay, I don't think I can say one, but I think there are a couple really interesting things. He had this ability from the age of 15. His father sent him to Milan to start trading. And he had this ability to go right to the center of action. In other words, he showed up at a new place and he didn't go to the suburbs. He went right to the middle, was able to pick up languages, was comfortable dealing with other adults. And he did this time and again. So he went to Milan. He came to Paris when he was 16. He showed up at the Central Bank of the Netherlands when he was 16 or 17 seeking to buy gold. When he went to Brazil at the age of 22, he went to Sao Paulo and said, we're setting up a bank right in the middle here. In 1964, when he was 32, he came to New York, and not in Brooklyn or Queens or somewhere outside, right exactly in the middle of New York, said, I'm putting a bank right here. So he had this confidence to go right to where the center of action was and to be able to conduct himself. And I think it's rare enough to be able to do that in one place. He was able to do that in 6 or 7, 8 places, wherever he was. I think the second thing is this connection between doing well financially and helping people. I think it's very common, especially in the US, people spend their lifetime making money, making money, and only after they die, they say, okay, I will leave my money to charity. Or when they're 80 and I'm done working, now I'm going to give it away. For him, this is part of his heritage as a member of his family, as a member of his community, that you were expected to help all the time. You didn't have to have a foundation or official charity, but if you were someone who had means, you gave money to the synagogue. If someone was hungry, you helped feed them. And so this connection, it wasn't I do one thing and then I do the other. It was all part of the same thing. Now he had sort of superstitions, feeling that if I should give money or be helpful to people because then God will look kindly upon me, or that it's bad form not to do that. But it was also sort of very much who he was. And so the level of philanthropy, which was on a personal basis, like you had left your home, maybe you needed a job, he would find someone a job even if they didn't have the qualifications. Some people were trying to get together to build a new synagogue or a community center in a place where they didn't have a place to get together. He would help them do that. And later it became college scholarships, support for medical research, universities. So that was very much part of his life.
And it was really interesting in the biography, because when we are writing a biography, we were talking about that just a few minutes ago. But you don't have to pick one aspect of the life of someone, especially here in Safra. This is a really rich life, not in the sense of money, but in mentality. And we have here the foundation today of Edmond Safra. So this is a part of an heritage, a big heritage, and I think it is important also to talk about the mentality of Edmond Safra. We talked about the religious aspects and the way he was giving a lot, and talking about the mentality was a really interesting thing that you had to do to start the transmission of the story of Edmond Safra.
Yeah, I think there's maybe a tendency when you write a biography, whether that person is a tennis player, a singer, a business person, to really focus on like the thing they did the best or that they were known for. And then you start to read back and say, they first picked up a tennis racket when they were 4. And that's the progression, right? They were destined to become this. And so you really focus on that one thing. Or someone who works in technology and innovation, right? It's Elon Musk, he developed this car or something like that. life is never always so simple. Humans are complicated. They are often doing more than one thing at once. And if you are, I think, trying to be honest, I think often people are very interested in biographies about people who make money, and success stories and how much they made and how they did it. But for anybody, that's really only a part of their life. And I think part of the challenge here was to try to tell a series of complicated stories, because he had businesses in many different countries and he started banks in different countries. He also lived in different places. There are documents in 8 or 9 or 10 different languages here. And so as the story progresses, to try to bring all the elements of this person so it's a full portrait rather than just a business story on the one hand or a personal story on the other.
And can you talk about the way you did your researches, the documents? I mean, I think, and you lived in different places, this is difficult to collect all the documents, and there's no a lot of videos or photos of
Yep.
Edmond Safra. So
Right, so he was someone who never really appeared in television, had a big sense of privacy, very little audio tapes even of his voice. What there was is an archive that his foundation have of his personal and business papers going back to the 1930s and 1940s in 8 or 9 different languages. In addition, his two of his main banks, Republic Bank and Safford Republic, were publicly held, which meant that they had to make annual reports every year, and so you can get the information about the business in great detail there. There was a third source in that in the years after his death, people had gone around and conducted interviews with 300 or 400 people who knew him. These were people who worked for him. These were people who went to school with him when he was 10. These were well-known philanthropists, central bankers. And so I had transcripts, mostly in English, but also in other languages, of all these interviews. And so there was a lot of reading to be done of these, what I would call primary sources of people telling stories, matching what people were saying with what I could document, because people's memories sometimes are not always 100%, and then doing my own research in other formats and speaking to other people. So there's a lot of, if it's like a lot of digging, there's a lot of that, and of course, a lot of material that I was not able to include, because when you write something like this, you're probably leaving out 80% or 90%.
Because there is also the oral tradition, especially for the work of his father.
Yep.
But this is difficult to collect those documents when you have this place of oral tradition,
Yes.
and only like trading through words and promises, and not only by contracts or.
That's right.
And I just have the last question, because we see through the journey of Edmond Safra the role and the place of a banker in the world. And this is, I think this is the chapter 15. You talk about the traditional banker in a new world. So did it was maybe like only a traditional banker in a new world, or did it fit into the new world of banks? And we see that he's always traveling in changing places and changing cities that are transforming through modernism and all the things. So it was a traditional banker,
Yeah.
or a very new banker, and did he change the job as a banker?
So this is one of the themes that comes through, and many people would see it as a contradiction. In many ways, very traditional. He always dressed a certain way. He wore the same blue suit from the same tailor that his father had used. This old world sense of how you relate to a customer. He didn't like to take risk. He liked to only lend money to people that he knew. You treated customers in a certain way. He wasn't very big on all the new types of risky financial instruments. He didn't really want to be in hedge funds as much, etc. So there's a degree to which he would say, I'm a traditional banker. At the same time, constantly innovating, because he was moving from Brazil, starting a new bank there, starting a new bank in New York, starting a new bank in Switzerland, and different types of banks, a private bank in Switzerland, a bank for middle class people in New York, where he was doing the most modern marketing techniques. One of the great stories is that in the US in the 1960s, you were limited to how much interest you could offer. So if I wanted you to open an account, the most I could do was offer you something worth like $10, like a toaster. Okay, that was very common. But he realized that there was no limit to what I could give you if you brought a friend in to open an account. So they made an advertisement that said, if you bring a friend who opens a large account, we'll give you a black and white television. And people would line up around the block because they would get a free television. So this was completely innovative, new, something like from New York Mad Men era, right? So he was able to be as progressive and as modern as you could be, adopting technology, installing computers, all that sort of thing. It was not simply, we're only going to do the sorts of things that we did 100 years ago, but it was the mentality and the philosophy of conservatism, not taking too much risk, taking sure profits when you can, and protecting the depositor that enabled him to build a large platform that he could then plug into all the other interesting things that were going on in the world. And it's not, in some ways it seems a contradiction, but if you understand who he is and where he came from, it's actually living in the most modern world, but adhering to your tradition and customs. That's what the life was like.
And always have this audacity because he started at 15 years old. That's
Yes.
really, really interesting to see that he was just sent in another country.
It's like
good luck, and only at 15 years old he started this business. That's just amazing.
Yeah, it was very common in that world for people to start working in their family business when they were 14 or 15. For most people, a family business might have been a stall in the marketplace or a store. His family business was a bank, and it was 1947. His father was sitting in Beirut. He could see that things weren't going to be so great in the Middle East, and he said, we need to have some business outside. And so he decided to send his 15-year-old son to Milan. He set up an account for him. He knew a few people there, but basically it was like, go out and figure it out.
Yeah, good luck. So thank you very much for this interview. Thank you for your time. I really enjoyed this book and this biography. It is really important to see the journey of Edmond Safra. So thank you very much for your job and for your work and for this biography. I recommend. Now I'm going to switch in French. Je vous recommande absolument l'épopée d'un banquier. Donc comment Edmond J. Safra a bâti un empire financier mondial aux éditions Le Cherche-Midi, qui est un livre magnifique qui vous apprendra beaucoup sur l'épopée et surtout sur une mentalité. Et ça c'était le point très important. Thank you very much and see you soon. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It was my great pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate your interest.
Thank you.